Hello and welcome to the latest DTP podcast. I'm DTP Director Andy Roskell, and today we are joined by Adam Hutchinson, Director of Resources at 54 North Homes, a newly formed housing provider in Yorkshire. Today's podcast is about the insider's view of a merger, what is involved and how you can achieve a successful merger. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Andy. Great to be here.
So, Adam, just to start off with, we worked with you on the merger of Leeds and Yorkshire Housing Association with York Housing Association, which is part of the Carbon Group, to form 54 North Homes. Can you give our audience a little bit of background about the organisations that were involved?
Sure, yeah. So the Carbon Group is a registered provider based up in the northeast. They own and manage over 25,000 homes and were actually formed themselves through a merger, I think, in 2017. A year later, 2018, York Housing Association joined the group as an autonomous subsidiary, so operating in Yorkshire, owning and managing its own properties, but also managing Carbon's properties in the Yorkshire area. And my legacy organisation was Leeds and Yorkshire Housing Association, and that was an organisation of around 1,700 homes, headquartered in Leeds, but operating throughout Yorkshire, in fact, so in Leeds, Barnsley and South Yorkshire, and spread out all the way to the east coast in Whitby and Scarborough.
Okay, great. So we know a little bit about the organisations. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that you faced during the merger process?
Yeah, so Leeds and Yorkshire Housing Association merged with York Housing Association, but York were part of the Carbon Group. So there was sufficient resource, let's say, on the Carbon York side of things. But I think resource probably initially was one of the big challenges for us. Although through the kind of legal merger process, the colleagues involved was quite a small, tight group, really, the exec team and one or two others. But it was very intensive, especially as we got into the due diligence phase. So the main challenge, I think, was the balance between working very hard on this really important project, whilst also not putting all of our eggs in one basket and wanting to maintain our business as usual commitment and that continuous improvement we were trying to deliver through probably quite an extended period until we were confident that this was the right route and that we were going to be able to complete the project. I suppose what helped was that we always felt that there was a very strong alignment between the parties involved, that everybody did share a kind of values and kind of similar cultural approach. And that really built quite a lot of trust quite early on, which really did help move things forward quite easily, I think, albeit there was a lot of process to move through.
Obviously, quite a complex process. How did your board go about making the decision to merge in the first place?
We were approached originally by Carbon to understand our appetite to get involved with the merger with the group, this exercise to merge in with York Housing Association. So it was a responsive decision. It wasn't a proactive move on behalf of Leeds and Yorkshire Housing Association. The board had established a merger position statement where they would consider requests, invitations to merge, subject to certain criteria being met. And really, the overriding objective for the board, independently all through the merger, has been to improve the customer experience. It's been a total focus throughout on the impact to our customers. So whether that's improvement of stock or improvement to the quality of services that are being delivered to those customers, that was at the forefront of their mind. And the board felt assured that by undertaking this process, that they would be achieving those objectives to improve the quality of the customer experience throughout.
You mentioned the merger position statement. That seems to be good practice these days, doesn't it? To sort of think ahead about the circumstances under which you might actually consider a merger. So that's good progress. So in terms of the timeline for the merger, can you give us an idea of how that panned out from initial discussions to when you finalised the deal?
Yes, I suppose we entered into kind of preliminary conversations in the autumn of 2021. The board resolved that it was something that they wanted to explore, and we took through until May 2022 to develop an initial outline business case. That being approved by all the boards involved, we then entered into the more detailed due diligence phase over the summer of 2022, and we achieved legal completion of the merger in December 2022. Worked very hard to get that done ahead of the Christmas period in 2022. And actually, the process goes on past legal completion. So we are now working towards a full systems integration to complete at the end of May 2023.
What other challenges did you come across during the process, either before the merger happened or shortly after that?
I guess from my kind of personal point of view, I think the biggest challenge really was this question of how much do we proceed with our own independent strategies to achieve the business objectives. So in my role, I'm responsible for finance and IT. So we were working on a significant IT strategy, and there was a number of treasury activities that we were undertaking as well that were right for our independent business that did require kind of significant investment. We couldn't put them entirely into abeyance while we went through the merger conversation. But obviously throughout that process, it's never a done deal until we sign on the dotted line. And so there was a long period where we were wrestling with how much to do as an independent organization. So whether to make significant investments into upgrading our kind of intranet, document management systems, things like that from an IT point of view. We would be able to achieve those through the merger, but if the merger didn't go ahead, until what point should we progress those projects independently? Similarly with the Treasury, we were renegotiating loan facilities independently. Perhaps if we'd waited, we could get better commercial terms as part of the group, but waiting wasn't really an option, so we had to proceed. So I'd say that was the main challenge, was balancing how far you continue as an independent organisation before switching over into just focusing on achieving your objectives through the merger.
It sounds obviously quite challenging, but I guess also quite a rewarding process and some key learnings, I guess, coming out of that. What advice would you give to organisations that might be considering a merger or an acquisition, or at least discussing them?
What is forefront of people's minds really is balancing that resource, isn't it? How much do you want to focus on your own plans to deliver the organisation's objectives versus spending the time and effort and disruption to fundamentally reorganize your business in order to achieve these things. As I mentioned before, the merger process is intense for a small team of people, but then now we're in the integration side of things, and that's intense for a much wider group of people who are all trying to work to develop a new way of working. It's not the same as either party were working in the past. It's a new way for our new organization. The other thing I guess I reflect on is the due diligence process that we went through. It is a really insightful process to undertake. We at Leeds and Yorkshire had not been through a merger situation to that extent in the recent past. And turning over all of those stones in our organisation, it did reveal a few areas where we perhaps didn't have the assurance that we had thought we had in certain areas. So it's a lot of hard work, but it was really useful and have that level of scrutiny of the organisation. I guess it's what we're seeking to achieve through internal audit and things like that. But yeah, we did turn up some surprising outcomes, and I wonder if there's a way of bringing that into a more business as usual kind of process that has less jeopardy surrounding it than when you're right in the thick of the merger conversation.
I remember you and I having a number of discussions during the due diligence process, which of course is the process where you're looking at your potential partner and at the same time they're looking at you, and it can be quite challenging. But also, as you said, there are learning points emerging as well, aren't there?
Yeah, and I think it can feel personal when somebody's examining and questioning and passing judgment on your work and on your organisation. But I think you've got to take it like an adult and learn those points from it. So that was the only point really where any kind of difficulties arose, I suppose. But it did show us the benefit really of the genuine, I think, shared values that we had with either party, that there was a similarity in our approaches to what we're trying to achieve, how we're trying to achieve it, and what was important in going through this process. So having that end goal in mind and the vision of the benefits that our customers today and in the future were going to achieve meant that we were able to kind of get through any challenges that arose, that they were just there to be overcome. They weren't there to block or stop the process.
Fantastic. Well, those are some great insights, Adam. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and our combined experiences with our listeners.
Thanks, Andy. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's it for this episode of the DTP Meet the Client podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and be sure to tune in next time for more insights and stories from our clients.